Well, good afternoon and welcome to the 27th Annual Black Males State Conference, a webinar, the talk, a conversation on criminal justice, health, and education. Today, we're going to be discussing the health focus area, and it's my pleasure to introduce the chairman of the Indiana Commission on the Social Status of Black Males, Chairman Kenneth Allen.
Thank you, James, and good afternoon to everyone. It is indeed an honor to be with you virtually. Again, as James indicated, my name is Kenneth Allen. I currently serve as chairman of the Indiana Commission on the Social Status of Black Males. The commission continues to address the challenges confronting Black males while trying to aid in decreasing problems they face in areas like criminal justice, education, employment, health, and social factors. This year is huge for us as 2020 marks the 27th year or 27th anniversary since the commission was started by partisan legislation in 1993. The commission has been in partnership with elected officials, community leaders, policymakers, as well as the faith-based community to serve Black males and resolve issues in these 5 focus areas. The commission has produced and provided to Indiana residents publications. We've hosted state conferences and facilitated national conferences and engaged with local commissions and grassroots organizations on targeted initiatives. The commission seeks opportunities to partner and enhance existing programs in communities that are working and making a difference and making Indiana better for Black males. The Commission on the Social Status of Black Males is committed to helping to build strong Black men in our 5 focus areas. The Commission's mission is to develop strategies and to remedies to encounter the negative statistics and make recommendations to improve the quality of life for Black males. Black males must clearly understand that they have been endowed to be men of mission, leadership with a family and in the community. Now it's time for the commission to accept the charge and train up the next generation of Black males to experience health, prosperity, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The commission is very fortunate that we have local commissions across the state, approximately 9 commissions across the state in cities like Anderson, Bloomington, Evansville, Fort Wayne, Gary, Indianapolis, Jeffersonville, Michigan City, Muncie. And each of those various commissions have their own unique leader in those areas. We're so glad that you joined us for our conference. This is historic for us. The first time we went virtual, so we took our talent to Zoom. We're excited about our conversation around health. We're excited about our panelists, and we look forward to a great, healthy discussion on the Black males and the state of our health. I'll turn it back over to James for the introduction of our panelists now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, good afternoon and welcome to this virtual discussion on health. I am James Garrett Jr. I'm the executive director for the commission, and we are fortunate this afternoon to have a distinguished panel group to talk about health and how we can look at health resources and better health for Black males across the state of Indiana. Today, our panelists are Ms. Esther Lewis, Mr. Nathaniel McGuire, Dr. Janet Seabrook. And I will begin now with Ms. Lewis and have you introduce yourself to our audience and talk a little bit about what you bring to this discussion and what it is you do in serving Black males.
Awesome. Thanks, James, for the introduction. And thank you, Kenneth. As always, you do an amazing job of communicating the mission of the commission and growing that vision throughout the state of Indiana. My name is Esther Lewis. I am CEO of Holistic Evolution. Holistic Evolution is devoted to the evolution of young men through mentoring, health equity, and other preventative programming. I have worked with the commission for about 7 years now. And so I'm just, always a big supporter of everything that you guys are doing. Of course, my purpose and passion is to inspire young men, and that's me.
Great. Dr. Seabrook?
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Janet Seabrook. I'm the CEO and founder of Community Health Net Health Centers. We are located in Northwest Indiana. We have 6 locations throughout Northwest Indiana. And I think that one of the things that has given me great joy to be invited to participate in this panel is that I am also a member of the Gary Commission on the Social Status of Black Males. I've enjoyed my role in being a member of that commission, and I'm more than happy and excited to be able to participate as a panelist today. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Great. And Mr. McGuire.
My name is Nathaniel McGuire. I'm the CEO of Counseling, Coaching, and Spiritual Direction, and I'm excited about this too. I want to thank you, Alan. Part of my job is to come alongside of families, and especially Black families and fathers, to understand, teach them how to connect, and how to, with the churches too, allowing them to understand what therapy and psychology is and not to be afraid of it, and help them to deal with the stigmas in our community. So I'm really excited to be a part of this because I'm constantly dealing with Black males' mental health and trying to help them heal and trying to be the bridge, especially with the Christian community and the psychological community.
Great. Well, thank you, distinguished panel members. And it's obvious that you all have a passion for wanting to serve Black males and our respective communities. So the first question that we're going to try to unpack is, we know the health disparities exist. You know, what do you feel we can do or you can do to bridge those health disparities and, as Mr. McGuire stated, get information and resources to Black males? And we'll begin with you, Ms. Lewis.
Thank you for that. So I have quite a few ideas on how we could service Black men. One of the really good or great things that the commission does is the Indiana Black Barbershop Health Initiative. We take volunteers into the barbershop and they perform health screenings on individuals that are there. So I would love to see that taken to the next level. I would love to see us take medical volunteers into nightclubs where a lot of our men go, and it's just about accessibility. I would love to see like health professionals go into like the gym when men are there playing basketball. It's really, really helpful that we have federally qualified health centers like Community Health Net that is able to give individualized attention very specific to the geographic location that the men live in. But I would just like to see that happen more outside of the building, kind of going where the men are. The Black Barbershop Health Initiative is kind of like a step one, so to speak, to actually initiating and trying to encourage the conversation around health and Black men. The conversations that have happened in the barbershop year after year, you know, that's great. But I would like to just see it in their faces just a little bit more.
Great. Dr. Seabrook?
So thank you for that. That was a great question. Thank you so much, Esther, for information about Community Health Net being a federally qualified health center. We're also patient-centered medical home, and we like to create an aura, so to speak, of creating that family physician-based care where we are so integrated into the family unit that the entire family feels comfortable coming to Community Health Net as their primary care provider. However, what we have seen throughout the years, and we've been in business for over 20 years, invariably when we look at our numbers, throughout the year, we have more women and children coming to seek services than we do men. So what we have found is that we have to take it to the men, just like Esther described at the barbershops. And that's why we were so determined to be able to purchase a medical unit on wheels that would be able to go out into the community where men are to bring those services to them, because we know it's very difficult at times, particularly when they're dealing with behavioral health issues. They don't really want to come inside to any location where it may, be a stigma or something like that. So we're looking at ways to help to reduce the disparities. We've partnered with agencies such as the local jails to talk to men as they're being discharged or released from jail, to get them into care, because sometimes that care has been overlooked depending on how long they've been in. And so we try to do things that will actually bring the care to them to reduce the disparities, particularly in men related to their health.
Very good. Mr. McGuire.
So mine at times tends to be non-traditional because of the private nature of my practice. And what Dr. Seabrook suggested, it's so powerful because 80% of the men that come in here, they're really coming in because a woman guided them here and told them that it was okay to do therapy. And it's really powerful, and we know as brothers, right? Black women save us all the time. But I live practice-wise where I'm talking to a man, the only reason he's in here is because his girl brought him in or said it was okay or that he needed to talk to somebody. And so one of the avenues I really try to share with people, especially Black women, is to continue to share with Black men how important it is that it's okay to talk to someone. They are my biggest advocates. Black men are still not comfortable sharing their feelings and talking. Women are. So when I first started, I usually tell people, when I got a marriage and family therapy degree, for about 3 or 4 years, I was the first Black male in Indianapolis with a marriage and family therapy degree. I say that just to show where we're at, right? Like, I know there needs to be one of me on every corner, but they're not. And so they're more growing and they're more now, but that's how rare we are. So then if they even get somewhere, the fact that they might not be looking at another Black face, whether it's a Black female or Black male, is really hard. So imagine you go through all that stigma, then you finally get here and someone doesn't look like you and doesn't understand you. It just makes it even harder. So that's just to show, how far we have to go. Hopefully years from now, there's plenty of us to get a hold of. And the other place really is churches. When a lot of the pastors have really been coming alongside and understanding that there's a mental health issue. And so I love the partnerships with them I've been building, where they're telling their man, like, we're doing this and this is what you guys need. And they give me an opportunity to come into their building and talk to them in small groups so they can come to us. So my biggest advocates really are pastors and Black women that do a lot of the work. I'm sorry to put so much work on y'all, but I ain't had enough work, but trust me, I see it all the time where Black women get Black men to come in and get some help.
I don't think one more job put on us will make a difference. I don't think it'll make a difference. But one thing I wanted to add in, what we found the most success since 2015, we've integrated behavioral health inside of our clinics. And so we have a clinical psychologist, and he is a male. And he is busy, and that has proved that has helped us bring more males into the clinic. Yes. And then as COVID came and we went to telehealth, the numbers shot up, because now I can stay in my comfort zone, but then still be able to reach out to my clinical psychologist who looks like me.
Yes, I just want to add that COVID, in certain ways, has been a real blessing, because it has changed the paradigm a little bit for mental health, and it's made it more flexible and more people friendly. So that same thing happened with me, where Black males that wouldn't come in and they're saying that I'm losing it. I'm locked in this house. I'm locked in the family. I'm being forced to think about things I haven't thought about before, and I can't, become overwhelmingly busy. And so it's really helped them to engage. So I've seen that same increase at the same time, and I hope we can all take advantage of it.
Mr. Chairman, your thoughts and comments.
Yeah, somebody put it in the comments, and I agree that we definitely, just speaking to the mental health piece, have to do better. And I think that it starts by introducing the concept earlier. I know I was very fortunate that, my family understood it at a very early age. So my first interaction with the counselor was when I was in elementary school. I didn't understand it, didn't appreciate it then, but now as an adult, I look back and realize how powerful and how much of an impact it had on me, because I experienced a lot of childhood trauma. And so it's definitely going to take more folks that look like me to be in those spaces, as Nate indicated, because people want to look in the mirror. They want to see themselves reflected in not only the person that's providing the care, but also the techniques. They want to be able to understand it in the language. So I think, from a cultural standpoint, we have to make it cool. And I think that, one of the things that Nate does so well is he makes the conversation around mental health cool. And as a result, as young folks, particularly our young Black males who are dealing with, enormous amounts of trauma with everything they're seeing on social media, on the internet and TV, they have to get the appropriate mental health that's needed. And, one of the things that scares me as all of us are in this middle of this pandemic, the results of the trauma that will come out of it, particularly for our young people. So I think that this conversation is definitely timely. We just got to do a better job of spreading the word that it's okay to not be okay, and to find the appropriate help.
That's so true, and we've talked about partnerships. And for those of you who are joining our discussion today, if you have questions, I ask you to please enter your questions in the chat field so that I may share those with the panelists. But we talked about telehealth and this pandemic and COVID-19. We don't know when this is going to end or what the fallout, as the chairman mentioned, is going to be. So what would you suggest we do as a preventative measure, being on the forefront of this instead of being reactionary, as it relates to telehealth and the pandemic and what's going on? Ms. Lewis talked about the partnerships. Dr. Seabrook talked about the partnerships in taking the resources to Black males. How would you suggest we prepare to come out of this pandemic? And I'll begin with Dr. Seabrook.
So one of the things that we talked about with the barbershop initiative is that the barbershop already is what some gentlemen consider a safe space to have their conversations and their dialogue. What we're looking at here, and I just had a conversation with a group out of Chicago, is looking at creating safe spaces throughout the community outside of the barbershops. There could also be spots where men and young boys could go to have those open conversations and with some education, being there either through the telephone or through telehealth, by having a professional being able to participate in the safe space at a certain time, so it wouldn't be an invasion of their safe space. But we're looking at the creation of more safe spaces throughout the community for people to come together to have those open conversations without feeling judged. So I think on my end, that's something that we're looking at doing throughout our community.
Great. Mr. McGuire.
Kenneth actually approached me earlier about something similar to that, Dr. Seabrook. It was Charlemagne the God has been really doing an awesome job, because he has been telling his personal testimony about his own mental health issues. And it's something, the percentages are so high about how African-American males get their information. And a lot of it has to do with entertainers, rappers, sports, this whole media push. So they're taken away from the stigma. And at the same time, if we build groups like this, our men are more open to it. So even Kinley approached me about having these small groups and staging them and opening them up to the community and putting, cooler titles on it, like Men Let's Talk, but making this a main resource and that it's okay. And if you guys don't mind, I just want to read something to show why this is so important, because a part of what we need to do is just understand how much this affects us and racism and our mental health. So I just want to read something real quick, just for our community, because a part of it is understanding first why it's so important. In 1963, the American Hospital Association and American Psychiatric Association, citing disproportionate number of inner city residents afflicted with mental illness, released a joint statement declaring mental illness America's #1 health problem, especially with those in the inner city. Their statement, coupled with the arguments of mental health workers and civil rights activists, were instrumental in the passage of the Community Mental Health Center. The Community Mental Health Center legitimated claims for racism as a mental health issue by acknowledging that mental illness was both caused and effect of racism. Most of us don't realize that racism causes mental illness. Even when I was in school, they really didn't talk about that because of some of the shame and the white shame associated with that. But think about if that's true, and we deal with it every day, how much mental illness, and we don't even know, because we're so conditioned to deal with it, we don't even know that that's something to talk about in therapy, that I'm facing racism, because it's so common in life. So having the ability just to share and talk about what we're going through, that alone, with the understanding that, causes so much healing. So whatever the group is, it's kind of the psych ed of teaching community leaders, no matter what field you are, that is healing to people, because Black people, we're dealing with something that causes mental illness while we're in a country that doesn't even acknowledge that it exists, right? And the constant trauma of that. So my thing is always just trying to help people have the simplistic understanding of what our people are going through every day, and that we need to acknowledge racism is extremely painful and causes trauma, and not talking about it causes mental illness.
And so I agree with you wholeheartedly. And you couldn't have chosen a better statement or quote to read. When you think about, and the key words you said was condition, that we've all been conditioned. And so what we find is this has been baked into the cake of our lives, really. Generational poverty, despair, mental health. When you think about just a few years ago, the third grade classes, boys, the number of boys in the third grade were used to determine how many prisons would be built. Those prisons were for people who looked like us. And now that we have incarcerated so many males, now we're starting to look at the females in the African-American population who've been left by themselves to raise their children. So when you increase the number of African-American women who are now also in prison, that leaves their kids to fall into the system. And so this is generational. It is devastating our community. And we have to figure out, by ourselves, it's going to take us, we have to figure out how we're going to work our way out of this. First, we have to make people understand and recognize the issue itself. And this is all based on racism. Yes. And it is so baked into the cake, and it's intertwined in almost everything that we do.
So I like what you said there, Dr. Seabrook, and I want to just bring some things full circle here around the conversation of mental health, right? Kenneth said this is generational. This is something like Black men have not been socialized to go to a therapist to talk about their problems. You're consistently told as a child that you're supposed to be strong. You're not supposed to cry. Like, you're not supposed to have emotions. The solution to this, from my perspective, is what FQHCs and what Dr. Seabrook is talking about, where yes, you have moms that are coming, but they're bringing their Black sons with them. It's about introducing that relationship with the healthcare system at an earlier age. When I was younger, you know, we girls have to start a relationship with their healthcare provider at an early age because of the changes that our body go through. My brothers, they did not have to do that. And so the concept of healthcare, the concept of going to a doctor, all of those things are foreign to a man unless it's an emergency, or for a young person, unless it's an emergency. I'm going to the emergency room because I broke my leg or I cut myself. But to me, the solution is exactly what Community Health Net is doing, and that you're servicing those mothers, you're servicing their Black boys that they're bringing in to come to the dentist, to you know, speak with a therapist, you know, about cognitive behavior therapy. You're talking to them about, you know, their needs, they're getting shots, whatever the case may be. So number one, building that relationship with the healthcare provider at an earlier age. But then moving past that, I work with a lot of teenagers. And so when we look at teenagers where they're starting to make decisions themselves, independent of their parents, and sometimes their parents is not around, kind of the biggest thing for me is just to pair them with a mentor. So to have someone that is health focused, that will be able to encourage them, hey, let's go to the gym. You know, when's the last time you've been to the dentist? When's the last time, you know, that you've talked to somebody about, you know, the problems that you're having or the frustration that you're experiencing? Many teenagers will say, oh, I talked to my girlfriend, like she's the best, you know, thing since sliced bread and she helps me out. But then when they break up, they're tore up. The man is tore up and they can't deal with that. So solution one is what Dr. Seabrook is already doing in the community that I live in, which is, you know, engaging our young men at an earlier age just by linking with the moms. And then solution number two, like I want to see more male mentoring. I want to see more men that like yourself, Nate, that have something to give to our young men. You have something to pour into them. And I think that ultimately will evolve. Our young men will evolve into a population that is not sad or not completely against expressing emotion or pursuing mental health services or going to the dentist. Like, yeah.
I agree with you, Esther. I think we need to make this as normal a part of life as possible. And you talked a little bit about it too, with the boys coming into the offices, the medical offices, with their moms or their parents or grandmothers. We have to figure out how to get into the public school system as well, because those boys need to see teachers and counselors that look like them too. And I don't necessarily know if that's happening. And I'm not saying that every school district can have the ability to have a school-based health center within the confines of one of their schools. We have one of our centers is located inside a high school. And I can tell you that if the superintendent of that school district, if I had to come to tell her and say, we aren't going to be able to provide services, we can't use this location anymore, she would literally probably lose her mind or leave her job. That's how much of an effect that we have had for the last 10 years that we've been embedded in their school district. It has helped not only the parents and the staff of the district, it has had such an impact on the students of that district. We have literally embedded ourselves into that school district. So they have the resources that they need, not only for the students, but for the staff and for that community that we serve.
Great.
Well,
And
even besides that, Dr. Seabrook, you guys do like back to school health fairs where, you know, the community persons is interacting with all of the schools, you know, giving immunization clinics and things like that. The big thing that you guys do at the Railcat Stadium where all the students can come and get their immunizations, those are all steps towards just really connecting our young men with the conversation around health.
well, very good. And we've got a comment from one of our viewers, and the statement is believing that we need to rebrand mental health as a part of overall health, you know. And so, Mr. McGuire, how do we go about changing that stigma and myth associated with mental health? And I mean, and I won't even hear the comment that my generation would utilize for someone who had mental illness or you know, some mental challenges.
Brother Garrett, I'll help you. I was on 1310 for about 2 years. I had a show called The Love Connection, where Esther, I was doing exactly that. I mean, when I say I was the first Black man with an MFT degree, like I was overwhelmed, y'all. Like I'm stacked with clients, mentoring families, boys, girls, trauma. When I started, I was talking to Black older Christian people about therapy. And this is like in 2009. Y'all have no idea what I've been through trying to tell Black people they need some help, okay? And they're like, well, do you believe in Jesus? I'm like, yes, I believe in Jesus. But I mean, when you go to the dentist, does your dentist have to believe it? Well, he ain't sticking nothing in my mouth. He don't know Jesus. And you crazy? Why are you talking about people's business? I mean, right? Like, I was just trying to help people understand this thing called therapy. For example, you're the same age emotionally as when you're traumatized, right? Arrested development, helping the average person understand that they have these little children when they get emotional and they can't act like an adult. And so we're trying to help people become mature. It's what Jesus, Paul said, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, reasoned as a child, now I put away childish things. So I had to understand myself how to translate therapy in a Christian way, and in a Christian way, talk about therapy. And it's a lot of work. But a part of what I'm trying to do now in my community is I have to teach them what it is while giving them therapy because they're afraid of it. But it's changing the words by just saying, hey, do you know that a conversation, the right type of conversation can help heal you? Just sharing your feelings and sharing what you're going through can help heal you. That's all it is that we're doing. And if you don't do that, you're abandoning yourself, and you're going to make, you're going to live a life based off of something that happened in your past, and you're going to destroy your life and yourself. And it's all because you believe that you don't need any help, right? And then you self-medicate, whether it be drugs, alcohol, letting the TV watch you at night. You don't know that's depression, right? So there's all these little ways where I'm trying to share with people that this is therapy. This is what it looks like. But it's going to take time. You know, there's a generation that they have just been taught something that it's almost impossible to let them go. And the only way certain generations are going to hear it is if the pastors tell them. That's it. They're not going to hear it unless the pastors say it. So what I'm excited about is I started in 2008. It is a totally different environment, I'll tell you right now, with therapy. You know, I have pastors coming to me like, man, look, I don't understand this stuff. You got to help me, man. Something's real though. This is a disorder. I don't know what it is. It's above my pay grade, but I need your help. So what I do love is there has been a transition with this thing called therapy. People are not as afraid of it. People know they need it, but now they just don't know who to trust to go to. So what Dr. Seabrook said, and this is what happens with Black men. When Black men trust a man, they won't be quiet. They'll keep talking and talking because they're looking for fathers, usually. They're looking for a man they can trust that will pour into them. And so the main thing I'm really telling people right now is just don't be afraid to tell somebody that this therapy thing is really good. And it's just about talking to somebody. It doesn't mean that you have to be schizophrenic. It doesn't mean that you have some major disorder, but it's okay if you got a major disorder too. We can help you make that not so major if you will come and talk about it, right? So everybody, just let me put it out this way. If you're a human being and your father wasn't Jesus and your mother wasn't Mary, okay, and they weren't perfect, you have something traumatic that happened in your life and you need to talk to somebody. If you don't go to the dentist, then your teeth are going to be messed up. You don't have to go, but your teeth will be messed up, okay? Just like the dentist or going to the doctor, therapy is the same way. I've never met a person that did not experience trauma in their life. And so if you're a human being, if you go through life without therapy, it'll show. Just like if you go through life without a dentist, it will show. It doesn't mean you're weak. It actually means you're wise to get help. And then all the wise people, what I learned, people with money, guess what they do to exercise their brain? They go to therapy. It's not a big deal. They understand it gives them advantage in life. So we might as well take advantage of it too.
Great. Mr. Chairman, your thoughts?
I mean, I don't know how you follow up behind that. I mean, not weak, but wise. I'm up here taking down notes. But what I think, as it relates to introduction, I can only speak from my own experience. And so making it cool, I know I was a part of a mentoring program, the African American Achievers that Representative Smith, who authored the legislation for the commission, started 20 years ago. And I wouldn't say that he tricked us, but he had a unique way of getting us to talk. So our mentoring sessions were every Saturday. And so we would have an hour where we would just talk about what was going on in our life, in our community, in our family. And then on the flip side of that, we spent the hour playing basketball. So while we didn't even understand it or realize it, but we were spending an hour getting our mind right and another hour getting our body right. And so I think that we have an opportunity to be, a copycat. I tell people all the time, it's okay to be a copycat as long as you copy the right cat. And I think that model is worth duplicating, not just in around the state, but around the country, that we bring particularly our young African-American males in a safe space where they have an opportunity with someone their trust, because as Brother McGuire indicated, they're looking for fathers. And for many times and for a variety of reasons, our young men don't have fathers in the home. And so if we can identify more mentors, we can identify more mentoring programs where they have that opportunity to share what's going on with them mentally, with somebody who's trained, let me be clear about that, and certified to be able to express those concerns. But also the hook for us was we got to play basketball. So you got to have a hook for young people because their brain is not fully developed until they're 25, 26. And so they don't understand the importance or significance of it. So we can't hold the responsibility on them. So we just have to be proactive, innovative, and creative on how we reel them in. And also have a hook for them. So I think that's one of the things that we can do and we can replicate in places across the state and even across the country.
We have another comment that I'd like to share. The question is, how can men who work full-time, supporting their family and church and other commitments, find time to mentor other young men? And what programs are available? And I pose that and I'd like for Ms. Lewis to respond to that, because she does a phenomenal job with her organization, and mentoring is very, very important. So Ms. Lewis, that question is yours to begin.
Yes, that's a great question. It's the $1 million question. As opposed to male mentors of other races, Black male mentors have less time, of course, to take on the responsibilities of another child that's outside of their family. Black men are typically the breadwinners, and they definitely do not have time to, not time, but resources to spend mentoring other people's children. So the first thing to that question is you have to make it a priority. You got to make it real for you. I tell men all the time that the young man that you are ignoring right now will be dating your daughter in another year. And you ignore him now, but you're gonna have to deal with him later when he, you know, impregnates your daughter or whatever the case may be. So the big thing is to make it real for yourself that these young men that you're ignoring are living in the same community that you live in, and their lack of success is your lack of success. If they are standing outside and they're shooting people, if they're robbing people, robbing a store or whatever the case may be, that's your issue. It's your issue because it's happening in your community, and there is a very good chance that you will be interacting with this person. Either you can interact with them on the positive side, or you can interact with them on the negative side. So the first thing is for Black grown men to make it a priority to give back to the younger generation. The second thing, one of the challenges when I worked with Youth Bill in recruiting male mentors was they're like, okay, I can volunteer, I can, carve out this time, but then there was not a lot of funding that was available to actually pay for the money that the mentor is spending mentoring. So that's actually why my organization started. Last year for my birthday, I did a fundraiser, and the fundraiser was in support, and this year as well. And the fundraiser is in support of reimbursing mentors in Northwest Indiana for the money that they spend on mentoring activities. So a man who I'm taking my kids to the Bulls game or to the Colts game, I don't have money to pay for their friend who may be in need of a male mentor or, an extra person. My organization would take the receipt from you buying that ticket or buying that kid's food, and then I would reimburse you for the money that you spent during that mentoring activity. So I understand, men have so much on your plate. You are the head of your household, requirements at church and requirements to the community. But we have to make it our priority. Like it's violence prevention efforts is just kind of like, we need to do this, or we need to just be okay with our community, like having or individuals running amok. So basically it's an internal decision for me.
Hey, James,
Sorry, go ahead.
could I add to that? I agree with everything Esther said. I think too, sometimes people think that it's a great undertaking that you have to do something at the capacity that, I indicated Representative Smith did with, having at the high point of mentoring program, 300 African-American boys. But I think that if you don't have that capacity, if you can do one, do the one and do the one very well. And so that's what I would encourage the person that put that question. If you can't do 3, if you can't do 4, just doing one has a huge impact on our community.
Well, one of the suggestions that came through the chat is, what about telementoring and group mentoring? Dr. Seabrook, your thoughts?
So this is also something that I met with the group earlier, that Chicago group that I told you guys about earlier. We're talking about doing the same thing, making connections with similar groups that we have here created in our safe space, connecting to other safe space groups in other communities, sometimes in other states. So we have all of this ability to talk to each other virtually now. So we would create virtual safe spaces. The same thing could be transposed and creating these virtual mentoring spaces. And so there's so much potential for people to make connections, to have mentors and safe spaces, not only in their community, but in communities and with people outside of their communities. So I just think that there's such, because of telehealth and telemedicine, we can just take things to such a greater level now with all the technology that's right at our fingertips.
Mr. McGuire, your thoughts on technology and maybe the question, are you utilizing technology in your practice?
Yes, Dr. Seabrook kind of pointed it out early that because of COVID, it's caused us to make therapy more flexible and more user-friendly for the client. So, you know, one of the things with my teens, especially, we forget that COVID hadn't changed a whole lot for them, because that is how they actually form connections, is through social media. So there's a lot of areas that it has changed their lives where they haven't been able to go to school. Like it's interrupted their lives in a lot of ways. The way in which a lot of them stay connected is through social media. So they'll know what's going on with each other. They'll know like how they're feeling, how they're doing. It's actually made us adjust to their world and understanding that, you know, they have just as much as connection as being on video than coming into the room. So I would call and they would come in the session, but they tend to want to do social media now. They tend to, so a lot of my clients that had came back from school, they're back, but they just want to continue to do Zoom and connect. So now I'm meeting with them like once a week when I was meeting with them quarterly. So I'm really taking advantage of that. And there's some groups that are teen boys that I'm trying to start up at Indiana State, and one of the other universities, Chanel Poole, my cousin, she just started at a Christian university where she's trying to bring Christian boys together to do that. And to be quite honest, I'm not that comfortable with doing groups on video. I've never done that before, but I'm doing it now. So, but like what Kenneth Allen said, statistically what we know is when boys talk about who changed their life, who was it that had the greatest impact, it really isn't a celebrity. It's always that uncle or that man that spent the most time with them. So that has the greatest impact. And all it takes is one, that they have a safe place that they can share with. So COVID has stretched me. I'm doing more of that myself. And the truth is, that's the future. That really is the future. That's where everything is going.
Right. Well, it's interesting. We have a comment from one of our viewers that the concern is that the new young generation guide is the street preacher, better known as the rap artist or R&B artist. How can we combat that message heard from this source and get them into quality therapy, which is not, it's not free? So, you know, the concern is, how do we challenge the messages that the younger generation is getting from free sources, be it social media, be it, you know, the musical genres? How do we go about dealing with that?
Well, can I?
So, go ahead, Nathaniel. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I do want to say that in my experience, it's actually the rappers and the young generation in Hollywood telling them that therapy is okay and to participate in therapy. And sometimes it's an older generation that is not that comfortable with it. So, you know, there's this dichotomy happening where, you know, and at the same time, there are some terrible influences out there, right? But they're also saying, but go to therapy at the same time. So I'm able to use Jay-Z, you know, J. Cole. I'm able to use some of these people, see the God, to say, hey, they even are saying that this is cool and that you need it. And they're like, yeah, I heard such said something on Facebook. I need to talk to somebody. So I'm using that to my advantage. The fact that these people, these celebrities are really tearing down at the stigma and making the young people actually more comfortable. So I've just watched the transition from when I first started to now. It's a big difference. But I want to talk about a little bit that point that when you talk to people statistically, especially young boys, and you ask them, all the data is there about who had the most impact in your life, who did you model after? It's some man that poured into them. period. It's not a celebrity. It's not a rapper. It's some man that poured into them. So it does go to the point that I think that Esther is saying, that Alan is saying, that man, if we have the time to pour into one of these boys, we're either going to change their life or the rapper is going to change their life because we didn't spend time with them. And that's really, that's human behavior. You know, it's either you have an influence on them or that outside entity has, you know, influence on them. And so it's up to us, if we're around some young man or we have the time, to take advantage of that and pour into them, because that's just how the mind and body works. Whoever pours into you the most and is that closest male figure is who you're going to emulate.
Ms. Lewis.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nathaniel. So it's so funny that you brought up Jay-Z and the rappers, right? Because in preparation for this conversation, like I copied lyrics for Polo G.
Yeah.
Polo G, I know, right? So I want to read this to you guys. And I want, just in response to that question, music has always been like a soothing mechanism for us, right? And so you see a lot of rappers, like, yes, they rap about things that happen to them and it's negative things that happen to them, but it's therapeutic. They use that as their talking points, so to speak. Like, I didn't go to therapy, but I wrote this song, and in this song, I talked about the trauma that I experienced. So I want to share just this one verse of Polo G's I Know. It say, living on his own and he running out of options. Now, cause he felt like he couldn't be himself at his mama house, hitting licks, missing school, junior year, he thought about dropping out. Him against the world, 40 on him when he popping out. On, like, this is my students. This is literally my students. You want to drop out when you're a junior. When you outside, you and he's talking about 40, that means a gun, you know, like, you don't feel safe in your own community. And so whether you plan on using the gun or not, you know, just having that as security. And he's saying hitting licks. So that means, like, you know, stealing or robbing people. But the big part that we don't talk about, but he brought up in this song, he says, so hate the criticism, he uses music to block it out. By his auntie, he was molested as a baby boy, messed up his head, it even changed the way he played with toys. Up late night rapping, then they told him to quit making noise. Stuck in his feelings, he been spending every day annoyed. He want to stand over a Nigga, leave his face destroyed, right? So he talks about molestation. He talks about how that impacted him and how that changed him and how angry he is. Like, all of this is what our young men are going through right now. Like, I have so many conversations I had a student that he wanted to enroll in school. He has a baby, he wants to change his life, but another student had shot up his house like the weekend before. And so he was scared to come to school, you know? So anyway, music can be therapeutic, even if sometimes it's venting. Just finding those lyrics that align with where you are, that can be helpful. Because if you can't say it out loud, your favorite artist has or can, and it can be therapeutic.
And I think that music sometimes is a way to start the conversation with young people. If you allow them to express themselves in a way that they feel comfortable, because some of the words we may not understand, some of the street language. But if I'm on video and I wrote that and I'm rapping it to my friends who are on video, virtual group therapy with me, the conversation is going to start. Somebody else is going to start rapping and saying their story in that conversation. But you have to let people come to you as they are with what they have. We can't dictate, we should not. dictate the way it is brought to us.
And another comment that we've received is you talk about engaging other folks. How about engaging athletic coaches, other male teachers, utilizing some of these extracurricular outlets for our young men?
So I can tell you that teachers are usually the athletic directors and are usually the mentors and are usually like everything to our young men. It our especially our African American male teachers, right? They are so completely overworked. They come and work in the education environment because we don't have a lot of male African American male teachers or presence in the school building. But when they come, they are, you know, they typically are volunteering to be like the basketball coach. They typically are volunteering to bring a group of boys to Indianapolis for the Indiana Commission's conference every year. They typically are the ones that are dropping, kids off. They are extremely devoted to their position in young people's lives. So we have to have additional support. That's what happens with mentoring and mentoring programs. We start off with individuals that have such a big heart for the work, but they don't share the load. And I don't want to say they don't want to share the load. We just, we don't have additional resources or additional mentors to come alongside them and say, oh, okay, you can go home and have dinner with your family today. And I will take, the football team to have spaghetti dinner. And I use that because my son, we had dinner once a week with the football team. But yeah, so the issue is not the male teachers, because those are the ones that typically are the first to volunteer, to mentor, to do anything extracurricular related to our boys.
Mr. Chairman, your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Esther, is that we definitely have to have those wraparound services for those that make themselves available to mentor. As she indicated, it's very important that our Black boys see themselves reflected in the classroom, and too often that doesn't happen. And I think the way we change it is we have to introduce the field of education as a cool thing early on in life, and not necessarily a thing that's an afterthought. And so the more we can make it cool to be an educator, and the more we can explain the opportunities in the space of education, I think our Black males would be more attracted to it. The other thing that I think is important too, when you talk about education and you're talking about our Black males in that space, is that they have to see themselves reflected in the curriculum. Dr. Seabrook mentioned a study about third grade. And what typically happens far too often for our children, particularly that are in public schools, is they come to school and they read curriculums that they don't see themselves in the curriculum. They're not able to connect to the concepts and even sometimes the names. I remember taking standardized tests and I'm like, I don't know anybody named Timmy. I don't even, I can't even jive with that. So we have to make sure that we're introducing culturally not competent, but comprehensive curriculum, particularly in the public school space for our Black males, so that they see themselves reflected in the classroom. I mentioned Representative Smith because he's obviously a mentor to me, but I remember in third grade in my social studies book, seeing a picture of him, and I didn't know him at the time, in my social studies book. But for me as a kid growing up in Gary, first time I ever seen a Black person in one of my books, and he was in the classroom, I'm like, man, his hair is like mine. His skin is like mine. It made me want to sit up, listen up, and pay attention to the lesson that day. And fast forward, I obviously had the opportunity to meet him, but I think that when our children can come to school and see themselves reflected in the classroom, reflected in school leadership. When they can see themselves reflected in the curriculum, they tend to pay more attention. And then also, obviously, if they can make the connection between economics and education, because a lot of times our children don't get engaged because they don't see themselves in the classroom. They don't see teachers that look like them. They don't see themselves in the classroom. And then they obviously are trying to figure out, how is this fraction, learning this fraction will give me a pair of new Jordans. And so we have to make the connection for them, the importance of education and economics and how it controls that. And the earlier we can do that, the better we can stop the prison to pop line by introducing them to those concepts. Curriculum that is culturally comprehensive, teachers that reflect them, and school leaders that reflect them, but also making the connection for economics and education, how they tie together.
Great. Well, we appreciate that. And now I want to kind of bring us back to where we started at the beginning of this discussion. And I want to talk about, how do we engage more community health workers? How do we engage more community leaders and barbers to help us bridge the health disparities gap, and to, as Dr. Seabrook mentioned, in essence, take the medical services to these Black males instead of relying on them to come to an FQH, a federally qualified health facility, or a hospital. Talking about meeting them where they're at. How would you suggest we engage more community health workers, community leaders, and barbers? Dr. Seabrook.
So one of the things that I would say is you have to show people the connection and the ties that are between health, being healthy, and being financially healthy and economically healthy in your community. They're all tied together, okay? If I'm a barber and this is my business, or either I'm renting a chair, if I'm sick and I'm unable to go to the doctor to get my checkups, preventive services, I ignore that until I'm sick. Now it's affecting my pocketbook because I can't pay my chair rent, and I cannot pay my rent on my apartment, or my mortgage on my house, or my car note. So we have to show people and educate people and make them understand, or help them, assist them to understand that health is tied into your economic and financial sustainability. And the more people understand that, and that is tied to your community and how healthy and financially stable your community will be. So that barber, if he or she is unhealthy, they won't be able to financially sustain themselves and take care of their responsibilities to their family and their communities. And in the same with the community health worker, has to understand that any business owner, any person that works to keep a business afloat, needs to understand that health is tied into everything that we do. People who have a car, every so often, you have to take that car in for maintenance. You have to get the oil changed. 50,000 miles or 80,000, depending on the tires that you buy, you have to buy new tires. So we do more things for our cars to be able to drive to work than we do for ourselves to be able to sit in the car and drive ourselves to work. We take better care of our cars than we do of our bodies that are our vehicles. So you have to make the connection that health is central and key to everything that we do. People who aren't healthy, people who cannot get out of their beds because their blood pressure is too high and they have a daily headache, or they've had a stroke, they can't pay their bills. They can't fix broken windows. They can't cut their grass. So the house looks a mess. Now the neighborhood looks a mess. So everything is tied together to health. And I just need people to understand that.
All right. Mr. McGuire.
I don't think there needs to be anything else said. I mean, everything she's driving home is what I'm constantly, sharing. And I think, Esther and Dr. Seabrook are just saying how well they have the wraparound and the community services. Mine is more of that individual build relationships with my barber and pastors. And as they get to trust me, and they realize they get something out of it too, where we're working together, where I'm referring people to them, they're referring people to me, but we're all in it helping the community. But the biggest thing is just the awareness that because of the trauma, our people still, a part of it's that post-traumatic slave disorder where we're just made to work, right? We don't matter as long as you work. If you got a job, you work that job. There is no self-care. So self-care in our community sometimes looks selfish. And so we don't understand taking a bath or taking a walk or just going to the mountains. We burn out, we work to death and then come home, eat something we shouldn't be eating and pass out in front of the TV. There are all these things called self-care that we didn't have the privilege of. So now we don't know what it looks like to maintain that on a consistent basis. So yeah, I mean, I think we owe her an offer when she talks about we will take care of our car and get that service better than ourselves, because mental health for me, I'm the same way. I got in it new. And so people pay me, I'm out of pocket. And it took me a while to adjust to that. And I went to two clienteles, one that couldn't afford it, that I give a discounted rate. And then this whole clientele that understood it was important for their mental health. And me as a Black person, that was a new concept for me, and just showing the mentality that people would come into my office and say, I helped change their life, but wanted to pay me $10 and told me I changed their entire life, marriage and everything, but would go get the hair done. And that hair set wasn't saving your life, but there was no concept of paying for something that would help change you and do self-care. So the biggest thing though goes all the way back to what Kenneth is talking about, and that's just at a young age, just educating parents on these things so they can train up their children. I mean, that's the biggest issue. It's a generational thing, but just parents understanding self-care, mental health, going to the doctor. Esther brought up an awesome thing that we don't think about, that how much women are accustomed kind of to going, but men are not. Even as you say that, I'm thinking about how can I make sure to train my son to do that? Have I done that? That how much that just escapes. But it's this parent thing that we have to go back to understanding, what does it mean to parent a child in an African-American community? And to me, that's the ultimate goal, to come up with a new paradigm of parenting children, African-American children in this new age, something we can all fall by and look at on a consistent basis.
All right, well, it's been a robust discussion, and before we conclude, I want to, as we're about to wind down, and we're going to start with Ms. Lewis, I'm going to give you an opportunity. What is your closing thought that you want our audience to take away from this discussion? We'll go Ms. Lewis, Dr. Seabrook, Mr. McGuire, and Chairman Allen. I will allow you the last word, sir. Ms. Lewis.
Okay, I wanted to respond to Dr. Seabrook and Nathaniel. What we're talking about with, taking care of our car before we take care of our body, we're looking at the social determinants of health. If you don't have a job, or if you don't have housing, if you don't have transportation to get to work, you're not thinking about, oh, I need to go to the dentist, because that is considered a hindrance, because I have to take time off of my job to go to the dentist. So that's time where I'm not going to be making money. And so, yeah, so we have to address the social determinants of health. Start off with, economics or employment, housing, transportation, those basic needs being met before we can even initiate a conversation around, I want to go back to school, or I want to address the mental health concerns that I have. Our Black men in Indiana are in survival mode. And I especially see it here, where our young men, are being thrown out of their parents' house or whatever the case, that the song Polo G, or whatever the case may be, where their basic necessities are not being met. And so we have to start there before they, I think, can even be in a place to receive the conversation around health, around mental health, around, even working out, having a healthy diet. I think that conversation is kind of shut down until their needs are addressed. The other thing I would just leave you guys with is my website. It's www.estherjlewis.com, and you can click on Holistic Evolution to learn more about my organization and what I'm doing in Northwest Indiana.
So what I'll say, two parts. Social determinants of health are very important. And that's one of the things that our agency, our organization does on every patient that comes into our doors, and even during outreach events. We do a quick questionnaire to find out where they are and what space they're in. That determines whatever barriers that are preventing them to accessing and getting appropriate health care. And that helps us out a lot, because sometimes that visit needs to be diverted to our clinical psychologist first before he or she will even get to seeing a medical provider or seeing the dentist or seeing the eye doctor. We have all of those services, but we look at mental health and behavioral health first and foremost, because those are some of the barriers that will prevent patients from getting good health care for themselves and for their family members. Because you need to know, if they're scrimping because they're trying to save to pay their electric bill or their gas bill, so they're neglecting some other things, particularly their health and getting their medications that they may need, their insulin, their blood pressure medications. So we take all of that into account before we even get to the physical part of the visit. And the other thing that I don't want us to forget about, we talked a lot about technology, but there are still some old school things that we can depend upon. I can remember back in the day that some of the dads in our neighborhoods would get together and they would block off the street. And they would, we can run out there, we can ride our bikes, we had jump ropes, we were double dutching, playing hopscotch and things like that. And not even realizing, and they turn on their grills on the street, not even realizing that they were being mentors for the other boys in our neighborhoods that didn't have parents, that their dads may have been away from the family for whatever reason. And so I can remember that happening very frequently in my neighborhood. And we also need to get back to those block clubs where we were looking out for each other with those block clubs. We knew our neighbors. We knew, from one corner to the other corner. So I think we need to remember that, yes, there's a lot of technology, but we still can look at some of the things that helped us in the past be that cohesive community that we were back in the day. And last thing I'll say is, if you want to get in touch with Community Health Net, 219-880-1190.
I want to leave you guys with all that are watching just something simple to understand what therapy is. This thing called connection. So as Dr. Seabrook talked about, one old school thing is this thing called love. I always try to remember that. I have a new commandment that you love one another. Our boys need love, right? And one of the ways we can connect therapeutically, you can do with your child, your son, your daughter, is just connection is this. You tell me how you feel. I tell you how I feel, and we have connection. A lot of our community just needs that. And it kind of looks like this. I love y'all, each one of y'all, Kenneth, Dr. Seabrook, Esther, James. Who's the young lady helping us right now? Who's
Ariana.
That? Ariana, okay. And how do y'all feel being Black, trying to help Black boys, knowing that most of us have been locked up, most of us have been oppressed in ways that this country won't admit, and here y'all are trying to kill yourselves every day trying to help us, right? What is that like? How exhausting is that, right? Just the ability to be able to share and talk about how hard this is, where we're trying to find mentors where they're not enough. And the ones we're looking for that are supposed to be, they're overwhelmed and they're having issues and they need a mentor. And we're really in that predicament right now, right? That's a lot, y'all. that we're trying to do. But just the ability to share that and talk to one another brings about healing. So I just want to encourage all of us to know that our community needs to connect in that way, and really, don't forget that we're really dealing with something, and we got to acknowledge it, or it causes insurmountable amount of pain. You can also go to NathanielMcGuire.com if you want any of my services, and check me out. But thank you so much.
All right. First and foremost, thank you to this awesome panel. Thank you, Dr. Seabrooks. Thank you, Esther Lewis. Thank you, Nathaniel McGuire. Thank you, Indianapolis Recorder. And thank you, James, for your participation today. I would sum up this conversation with one word, and that's great. And for me, GREAT is an acronym. G, guiding goals. R, reading and relationships. E, eating and exercise. And A, actions and attitude. T, and time. We want to thank everybody for their time today. This has been a great conversation. If you would like to follow the commission, you can do so on Twitter at ICSSBM. Again, that's at ICSSBM. We will be doing our last Zoom for our annual conference on October the 29th, 2 p.m. and we will be covering education. So we're excited about that. And we will also make these available in the coming weeks. Did I miss anything, James?
No, I think you covered it, Mr. Chairman. And we appreciate everyone who engaged this afternoon. As the chairman mentioned, we look forward to you joining us on October 29th, where the topic focus will be education.